Today, we've got something really cool to talk about if you're a fan of Frostpunk 2. The latest update, version 1.4.2, just dropped, and I've been spending some time checking out everything that's changed, what got fixed, and what's still a little rough around the edges. You know how this game always manages to feel like a mix between beauty and pain? Yeah, this update keeps that same vibe, but with some much needed polish that actually makes a big difference once you start playing again. So let's talk about what's new. First off, the interface fixes are a big deal, especially for people playing with a controller. You'll notice that the construction cursor is finally bigger, thank goodness. Because before, it honestly felt like you needed a magnifying glass just to figure out where you were placing stuff. Now it feels more natural and smooth when you're setting things down across the frozen wasteland. It might sound small, but little details like that really affect how the game feels when you're deep into city planning mode. And if you've ever tried to switch between controller and keyboard, you probably know how frustrating it was when the economy overlays just stopped responding properly. They fixed that too. Now, it actually works the way it should. It's one of those finally moments. There was also this rare soft lock that happened with some city messages, like the kind of bug that doesn't show up until you're already committed to your save and then suddenly you can't progress. Yeah, that's gone. They've cleaned up the logic on that and even made the Tails button navigation better, especially when it was set to random. It just flows smoother now. I also really appreciate the fix to the workforce slider. Before, it would sometimes give you this vague, blocked reason that didn't make any sense. Now it properly tells you why something can't be done, which saves a lot of guesswork when you're trying to balance your labor force between starving workers and freezing engineers. Oh, and the escape key behavior. Finally consistent. You hit ESC, and instead of pulling up the main menu at random or locking you in some strange UI state, it just does what you expect. It closes whatever panel you've got open. Simple, clean, intuitive. That's how it should have always been. One thing I noticed right away is that reactivated buildings and districts don't leave those ghost trackers on the Cardo level anymore. You know what I mean, the little leftover indicators that made you think something was still active or needed your attention, but when you clicked it, it led nowhere. Yeah, those ghost icons are gone, and the whole map looks less cluttered because of it. It actually helps you read your city's status way more efficiently. And this one's kind of hilarious, but also a real problem before. Sometimes the council screen would open without showing the UI at all. Like, you'd hear the sound cues, but the visuals just weren't there. Imagine sitting there thinking your game froze when really it's just a UI glitch. They've squashed that bug too, thankfully. Now, gameplay-wise, they tackled some pretty heavy stuff. If you've been stuck on Chapter 5 because of startup issues, you can finally breathe a little easier. That particular bug was a nasty one, causing crashes or load failures right when you were ready to continue your story. It's gone now. You can jump straight in without worrying about getting booted back to desktop. And there was a bizarre issue where the main district could sometimes spawn on top of the prefabs deposit in Hanging Rock. The game just decided to mash two major elements together and say, yeah, that's fine. Obviously, it wasn't fine. It messed with your layout and sometimes even your progression. They fixed that spawn logic, so your city's structure won't break in the weirdest ways anymore. Now, here's one of my favorite fixes. Population numbers no longer explode into the millions. You might have seen this before if you're a heavy builder. Suddenly your population count would skyrocket to some completely ridiculous number like 2,000 citizens, which obviously breaks the whole immersion. It was caused by a miscount in certain allocation processes, but that's all handled now. Your city stats finally reflect reality, again. Visually, the update adds some love to the fog effects, especially if you're playing on the Steam Deck. Before, the fog could look kind of flat or too heavy depending on your settings, but now it's smoother and it blends into the environment better. It's small tweaks like this that make Frostpunk 2 feel even more atmospheric. And if you're one of those players who noticed that the Promised Law highlight effect was too flashy or too distracting, you'll be happy to hear they toned it down. It's still noticeable, but it's not burning your eyes anymore. They also made some art adjustments to the side panel icons in the prologue. Nothing massive, but if you've played through it multiple times, you'll probably notice it feels cleaner and more consistent. The art direction has always been one of Frostpunk's strongest points, so it's nice to see them keeping it refined. A few smaller but still important fixes made it into this patch too. The deluxe podium now works properly when you're offline. That's something people had been complaining about because it felt weird to lose access to a feature you paid for just because your connection hiccuped. So yeah, it's fixed, and now it behaves like it should, no matter your network situation. Another really important fix is for screen resolution crashes, especially on laptops. Some people would go into graphics settings, try to change resolutions, and boom, instant crash. It was frustrating, but now it's stable. They've also made changes to how save files are handled, which should make your progress safer and reduce weird corruption issues. You can tell the devs are slowly tightening up all the small screws that keep the game running smoothly. Now, I want to talk about the late game situation because this one's pretty significant. If you're a hardcore player who's been building massive cities, like really pushing the engine to its limits, you might have run into a specific crash related to object limits. Basically, Frostpunk 2 runs into a cap with how many objects it can load at once. The error usually looks something like exceeded UObjects 2162,088. It's a crazy number, but once your city gets too big and there's too much happening, the engine can't handle it and crashes. The devs have acknowledged that this issue mainly affects late game saves, where your city is absolutely massive, and they've given a temporary workaround for people who don't want to lose their progress. It involves editing your engine.ini file. Basically, you go into your local app data folder for Frostpunk 2, find the config file, and manually increase the values for gc.maxObjects in-game and gc.maxObjects in editor. They recommend setting them to something like 1000, which raises the ceiling and stops the crash from happening. Now, that fix isn't for everyone. If your PC is mid-range or low-end, increasing those values might cause instability or performance drops. It's basically a brute force solution to keep your giant cities playable until they can release a better fix. The devs were really clear that this isn't the ideal long-term solution. It's just something you can do to get around the crash for now. They're working on something more efficient behind the scenes, probably some kind of optimization pass or smarter garbage collection to manage the object count dynamically. But still, props to them for being transparent and giving players the choice to fix it manually, instead of leaving us in the dark. What's cool is that this patch, even though it's technically a hotfix, shows how committed the devs are to refining every corner of the game. Frostpunk 2 is ambitious, and it's built on some pretty complex systems that simulate economy, society, and moral decision-making all at once. It's no surprise that small glitches slip through, but the pace of these updates shows they're listening closely to community feedback. I've seen a lot of players mention how much smoother their experience feels after this patch, especially on the controller side. It's kind of amazing how something as simple as UI responsiveness can make the whole game feel more immersive. You don't really notice how janky things were until they're fixed, and suddenly everything just flows. It lets you focus more on actually managing your city and less on fighting the interface. Performance-wise, there aren't huge frame rate improvements mentioned in this patch, but you can feel the stability. No more weird freezing moments when accessing menus or switching views. The save system tweaks probably help with that too, especially if you're juggling multiple saves like I usually do. It's nice to finally trust that the game won't just nuke your progress because of some background file handling bug. If you're someone who took a break from Frostpunk 2 because of bugs or crashes, this might actually be the update that makes it worth jumping back in. It's not flashy, there aren't new mechanics or storylines yet, but it's the kind of maintenance patch that tightens up the experience and makes everything feel more solid. And honestly, stability is what this game needs right now, before they move on to bigger expansions or features. I think what's most interesting about this patch is how it focuses on those player-specific pain points that can make or break your immersion. Like, sure, the big story moments and moral choices are the heart of Frostpunk 2, but it's the small things. Clearer UI feedback, working sliders, smoother input, that keep you in that mindset of, I'm running a real desperate city trying to survive the end of the world. When the controls and visuals get in the way, it breaks that illusion. When they work perfectly, it's haunting and beautiful at the same time.